Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by co-host Manny Lagos. Manny, how we doing on this fine Minnesota morning?
Oh, we're doing well. We're just talking about the weather a little bit. I know it's been a long winter. It is sunny, kind of, and windy today, so I think hopefully the guys will get a good session in. And I'm looking forward to spring/summer overnight here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this game coming up this weekend, which we'll preview with our guest today, Tyler Terens, one of the voices of MLS Season Pass, frequent commentator for Minnesota United games. Tyler, how are we doing today?
Doing well. Looking forward to coming back to my home away from home, which is Allianz Field. As I joke with the communication staff and Eric Durkee and everybody, my physical being, whenever I depart Allianz, goes back to my home in Cincinnati, but my soul always stays with the Wonderwall because we happened to be in at Allianz a lot last year. Not nearly as much this year yet, but looking forward to getting back.
I was going to say, saw you quite frequently at Allianz Field last year, heard you on the calls as well for that one. Looking forward to this one coming up this weekend. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the show, but first we've got to review the draw at Toronto. But first we'll take a look across the league. Busy weekend of Major League Soccer action, and no better place to start than the place Manny likes to start when we talk about U.S. men's national team. Brian White, one of the most informed strikers, American strikers, going right now, scoring 4 against Austin, including 1 off the face of an Austin defender. It was an impressive performance once again from from Vancouver, excuse me. But Brian White, man, he continues to put his name in the hat for Mauricio Pochettino as a starting striker for the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, unbelievable performance. My brain goes all over the place. Obviously, first and foremost, we've got Vancouver in 10 days now. And so it'll be interesting to see whether he plays. Obviously, they have the CONCACAF Champions League, but what a performance. 4 goals. I think I'd said earlier in the season, like, he by far to me is the best American striker in MLS right now. And he proved it with one of the more historic weekends for a forward in the league history. With a team that's without Ryan Gold, with a team that just seems to be firing on all cylinders in domestic and international competition. Really, really impressive.
Tyler, what did you take away from that Vancouver performance where they blew the doors off of Austin? I believe it was 5-1, and they continue to set the mark for the rest of the league. I would say rather unexpectedly, considering their preseason expectations.
I mean, I was certainly one of those people who had them pegged to be 12th or 13th in the Western Conference. So hand up, I got that one wrong, as we typically do when we're making preseason predictions in this league. But I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be on the call for both of their second legs down in Mexico for CONCACAF Champions Cup on FS1, and I got to talk to Jesper before the Monterrey game. And first of all, he's a great dude to talk to. He's different than Vanni Sartini, and everybody loved that guy's personality. But Jesper, he used to work in the media. He's known nothing but Danish football, and that's not a knock on it, but it's just his first experience outside of it. And he's pushing all the right buttons right now. And the biggest thing that I've been impressed with is, they're doing this without Ryan Gauld, as Manny mentioned, and I think they're 4-1-1 in all competitions without him. But they're also dealing with other injuries. They're dealing with sort of some rotating pieces along the back line, and they've got a number of different college kids who are contributing really big minutes. Whether it's Tate Johnson starting and playing all 90 in the second leg against Pumas, you got JC Ngannou, a UNC Greensboro kid, running the show in the middle of the field. Sebastian Berhalter, North Carolina kid, in the middle as well, and this is just a scrappy ragtag bunch of guys that Jesper Sorensen has them bought into a very, very identifiable and very obvious system. They like to get on the right-hand side. They like Pedro Vite cutting in on his left foot, and then it creates room for this 21-year-old stud, Eddie Aerocampo. And Manny, forgive me, but I don't think anybody knew about this kid coming into the season, and he's proving to be one of the best fullbacks in the continent right now.
No, and my only issue with your answer is that you brought up Greensboro, North Carolina, without, I've got a little bit of a special place in my heart for Duke, and Brian White is from Duke, so I think you can
exactly. Yes.
And by the way, the Stroud brothers, there's a lot of good players coming from Duke as well, but that area of the country now is producing, and it kind of is the best college soccer area, and that is a massive part of MLS development is, I think, college soccer still. And I think the interesting thing about Vancouver is I do think Brian White is an example of them too. On paper, Brian White's a solid player, but nothing special. But he does all the little things really well. He makes the good runs. He's so honest, and he's so dedicated to making the near post run. He's actually really selfless. Like, again, he's okay not scoring, but if the ball finds him, he will. So to me, that's kind of the way Vancouver is. They're solid throughout, and you've got these players that have to be really good. You can't just be average and then start to kind of dominate the way other in MLS. But certainly, Jesper has created an expectation of a way to play, and it's good, solid defensive play, and then it's also the freedom to go forward. And again, a little bit different than our style. They certainly do put numbers forward. They try to get in the box, and I've been really impressed with Berhalter too. I think that's another one where I don't know if I quite saw the trajectory from fringe starter to now really boss in the midfield and boss in set pieces the way he has. And it's not just the game this weekend. The games on the road in Mexico, that might be some of the best performance in the history of MLS in Mexico. So a huge plus for them. And then the Brian White goals just elevates this Vancouver's team stature in terms of kind of global recognition now.
And it's the second leg in a row where Jesper Sorensen elects to bring him off of the bench. Like they're getting this done against Monterrey and Pumas, where Brian White's not starting the game. And Daniel Rios, who's been a journeyman and a pretty unsuccessful journeyman in MLS and who's got a few Liga MX appearances originally from Mexico City. And he gets it done for 50 or 60 minutes, gives Brian White a break. And then Brian White starts on the weekend and scores 4 goals. And Jesper Sorensen looks like an absolute genius throughout this whole thing.
Is this, I don't want to bring down the conversation on Vancouver because I've been impressed as anyone at what they've done. We've seen hot starts from teams before. Is this something from what you guys have seen over their 8 games and plus the CONCACAF Champions Cup action? Is this something that is sustainable throughout the year, or is there possibly holes where they might fall off from that number 1 spot to a little bit lower in the Western Conference? Not out of the playoffs, because this certainly seems like a team that's going to be hosting playoff games come October and November, Tyler.
I mean, it's difficult to say. We usually see some sort of drop off with CONCACAF Champions Cup. It happens at some point, but like right now, I don't think anybody expected. And again, their personnel issues are well documented. Like they had a 19-year-old kid, Javine Badwal, who was playing in those final moments of that Pumas game because they just don't have the numbers right now. And I would have expected that the drop off was going to happen like 4 weeks ago following the Monterrey game, but they've gone and basically, been undefeated outside of a loss to Chicago since then. So who's to say right now that there is going to be a drop off? This league is set up so that there is going to be some sort of fall off, but like I think it would be just silly at this point to bet against Jesper Sorensen because like they blow through every normal Major League Soccer stop sign at this point in the season while also progressing in numerous second legs, winning down or advancing down to Mexico, winning on away goals.
Yeah, they've been impressive. Another team that has been impressive, I think, I don't want to say sneakily because they've been one of the better teams across Major League Soccer for the past couple of years, but based off of their off-season moves, I don't think anybody expected the Columbus Crew to still be undefeated at this point and sitting atop the Eastern Conference, Manny. They continue to get it done this weekend and continue to stay atop the Western Conference, or the Eastern Conference, excuse me, with a 2-1 win at St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they made a lot of news this week with Godzag, and just like that, people look up now and they're unbeaten and they've lost Cucho and they've kind of had to reassess how they're going to be an identity of attacking. My brain still always thought they were one of the top teams in the East. I mean, my gut says in the West with Vancouver, it's like a bike race. I still think the West is wide open. I just think the Pack will catch up eventually. Right now, I feel like it's still getting sorted out in terms of like how the summer will go. But to me, I think that's going to be a much more tight race. I think Columbus just said, hey, we are still one of the top teams in the East. We kind of know the other teams. And Columbus is like, that's just how it's going to be. It's going to be Miami. It's going to be Cincinnati. It's going to be Columbus as your kind of top 3 probably going there. And there'll be some outliers. There's no doubt Orlando's starting to look good. But at the end of the day, I just you can't not be impressed with Wilfried Nancy's ability to just, kind of take a deep breath and say, no problem, we'll figure this out. And it'll be fascinating. I think the Godzag will be interesting. Again, on paper, it sounds good. It'll be interesting to see if his style matches up with the way Nancy wants to play. And I say that in a nice way. I mean, it probably will because how good of a coach Nancy is. But I know a lot of people are really excited about it. I'm going to defer for a couple of weeks here to see how he actually does in a new style versus Philly.
Do we view Gazdag as the kind of Cucho replacement, or is that just not kind of how he fits in there, Tyler? And are we surprised that Philly sent him to an Eastern Conference team, a Eastern Conference rival at that?
I mean, yeah, like I'm surprised, but I'm also really not surprised by anything that Philly does at this point in time. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what that front office's goal is. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing you can applaud is Ernst Tanner's honesty throughout the whole process, right? Like he tells it exactly how it is, and
Yeah.
he'll do some things and say some things that we're all sort of thinking that we know to be true, but most coaches, most GMs, most sporting directors won't go ahead and say it publicly. Ernst does, and I certainly enjoy that as a member of the quote unquote media. But no, this isn't a like for like replacement with Cucho. Like Gazdag does not have the final quality that I think Cucho does, and that's not a knock on Gazdag. I think that he does some things better than Cucho, but this is more of like a Wilfred Nancy and Issa Tall, their GM, just trying to replace him on the aggregate and just trying to plug holes in terms of like maybe a mildly different way of playing. Again, like we need to see what that is. And like Manny said, I defer for the next at least month to be able to figure out what that is. And I'm not saying Gazdag can't score goals, but like I just think that Cucho was that type of, Sebastian Javinko, like light the league on fire kind of player. Gazdag strikes me as more of like a silent mercenary in that way, where like he's going to string together passes. Maybe it's like 10 goals, 10 assists, not blowing the roof off the league with 20 and 15 or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it'll be
I
interesting.
think Tyler just said it best there. I like it's hard, and that's why I want to defer a little bit because the this is a cruel game. The moment you think the system is there and you just need one player to go into it, it's great, but they better have the quality too. And the reality is that Cucho had the quality of a Giovinco. He really did. He was just every game. He was ready to kind of, explode or help elevate Nancy's system. Again, I think Gazdag is a very different type of player with a very specific skill set. And on paper, you say, yes, this will be perfect for our system. But then sometimes you get the system right and you don't have enough quality. So again, it'll be really interesting to see how he fits in to a crew team that kind of, was like, hey, people don't believe in us and we're going to show that we're more than Cucho. But again, I think it's early in the season. So I still think they're a little bit looking for it. But at the end of the day, like I said, the media, everybody was really excited about it. 4.5 million, is probably a good deal in their mind because they know what they're getting versus going on the open market. And I think for Philly, I mean, they probably had to do a new deal and give Gazdag a lot more money. And they're like, you know what? I think we can go out and do better and take that money in the market and see if we can find something that's a little bit younger, a little bit more up and coming.
I like these cash for player trade acquisitions that we're seeing across the league. I think I like the ability for these teams to kind of alter their rosters in that way, which they didn't have before. Moving on to our obligatory Lionel Messi Inter Miami mention of the week. 0-0 draw in front of 62,000 fans, the largest crowd in Chicago Fire history. I'll use that to transition to a little bit of breaking news here from Fabrizio Romano as we're podcasting here.
Wow, this is a big deal, Jonathan. We don't usually have breaking news on our podcast.
He's reporting, Fabrizio Romano on his Twitter account, reporting that the Chicago Fire have made an approach to sign Kevin De Bruyne on a free transfer. Your guys' thoughts on how that would fit in with what Greg Berhalter's doing in Chicago. Manny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously there would need to be a trade, I believe, for his rights with Inter Miami, if I'm remembering correctly,
sure.
if I'm remembering all the moves and machinations of this correctly. But if that comes off, that's a pretty huge signing for Greg Berhalter in year one.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, Chicago is trying to find their identity and balance I'm cautiously optimistic. And again, I'm not sure what Chicago needs to do or how they need to do it. So I'm just going to say this as a fan of the league and a fan of Chicago Fire. They just need to figure out ways to win and make the playoffs. And if they truly think this is the way to do it, I hope they're right. They've had some bad experience with some superstars and just really thinking that the superstar will solve the real kind of competitive problems of how hard it is to make the playoffs in this league. So my answer would be cautiously optimistic, but I hope it's not another Shaqiri 2.0 where it's just not quite the right guy and De Bruyne is not ready to carry a team. Again, we brought up Giovinco. I mean, he was 27, 28 and hungry. So my quick answer would be great. I love Chicago Fire's ambition, aspirations. They should be one of these clubs in the league that pushes getting high-level players. But I'm also nervous for them because, ultimately they've got a lot of work to do after kind of, over a decade of kind of really inconsistent soccer.
Tyler, your thoughts on how that would impact what the Fire do and what they're capable of this season?
Yeah, I'm with Manny. Like this is awesome from like for all of us who wake up at 7 a.m. to watch Premier League and have seen with Kevin De Bruyne too. But like, I mean, good Lord, like this team literally just it doesn't matter whether it's 11 kids who played at college, who played on Tobacco Road, or whether it's 11 superstars coming over from Europe. They have to make the playoffs this year and they have to become relevant. I mean, I was the voice of that club for 3 years. Three of the last 7 destitute years, I called games in front of an empty Soldier Field, and then I got to call the one this weekend in front of a sold out Soldier Field, which I had been to Bears games when I was living in Chicago, and it wasn't even sold out for those. So it was really, really cool to see that this De Bruyne thing will help get them to a point where maybe they can start to open up the bowl on a regular basis and like awaken the sleeping giant. I hate that phrase that everybody talks about with Chicago because they've been comatose for years now. But this would help. And there's talks about now a potential soccer specific stadium in Chicago. We've got the new $100 million training facility that they just implemented, and the first time that they've owned a grass field. So clearly, Joe Mansueto is proving to everybody that is willing to spend the money. And that was clear from the moment that he bought the team. But it's just a matter of like where that money's going. And the Shaqiri thing, as somebody who witnessed it firsthand, it was diabolical and it was not good for the club. It was not good for the locker room. So like Manny, I'm cautiously optimistic, but like the last experience that they had with a superstar went horribly wrong. And look what he's doing with FC Basel now. He's scoring left and right. It's like Antony leaving Manchester United and becoming the best player in La Liga. And Shaqiri's now proving to be the best player in Switzerland right now after, 3 horrible years with Chicago. So this looks great on paper, but like hopefully it fits in. To me, it makes sense. Joe Bamba on the left, Zinkernagel on the right, him delivering balls to Ugo Kuipers on an angle and whipping it in, like that all makes sense to me. But it's also a matter of a guy coming over from Manchester City to Major League Soccer, bringing his family into a new culture, bringing them over into an entirely different situation towards the tail end of his career. Those things don't always add up to the product and the player that we once saw.
Tyler, what did you think about the weekend? How was the game, Chicago Miami? 62,000. That obviously was exciting. I know it was 0-0, but it seemed like an exciting 0-0.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was a little bit like the Minnesota Toronto game where like,
Oh, it was okay.
well, in a sense where it was like it felt open
Yeah,
to a certain extent, but there were no real chances created. You know what I mean? Like it was exciting, but it wasn't, but it kind of was. Like I really couldn't make heads or tails of it. And like there are sometimes when I call a game and like I just feel like I need a shower afterwards because like you're like calling it and you're like waiting for the moment to happen and you're like waiting to crescendo the moment with the crowd and it never comes. So it just feels like you just are like dirty after the game. And that's how I felt. But it was a blast. I mean, like that was my first Messi game that I've called, and I was on the schedule for like the previous 4 Chicago games where he was supposed to play but didn't. So like all the Chicago Fire fans, I was just excited to be able to see him play, and it was really cool to see Soldier Field just
that's
absolutely
awesome.
packed. Yeah.
No, it is a sleeping giant, by the way. It is. I mean, I've said this many times, even on this show. I think it's a debate between Chicago and Boston for if they have a winning team, are they the best sports town in America? And I think it's a good debate between those two when the teams are winning. So, I just again, my brain goes to like how quickly we're talking about this, but it's a blue collar town. It's flyover country, even though it's a big city that should be recognized as one of the top 4 biggest cities. But you really want to make sure you get guys there that want to be there and play seasonal soccer. Again, I bring up the hunger because that's how good MLS is now. If a player is coming here, I don't care who they are, they have to be hungry. I mean, the reality is Messi's hungry to keep playing. Messi is hungry to push Suarez and push Busquets and Alba to keep running and working hard and finding them. And so, to me, that Kevin De Bruyne it does feel great on paper, but I really hope they're understanding that they want to make sure they're getting a player that fits the identity of Chicago, which is different than Miami and LA.
And I'm with you 100% on that. And I think Gonzalo Higuain was the first real example of somebody who came in and thought that they were going to be able to basically have a cigarette and a cup of coffee and be able to score 20 goals. And he bought in the last year because he realized that he wasn't going to be able to do that. And his legacy in MLS was going to be mildly tarnished based upon, as my dog is trying to make an appearance on the podcast right now.
Oh, please do.
Like, I think that Manny hit the nail on the head. Like he has to come and want to play because the Fire fans have been beaten down relentlessly by the lack of results, that there's zero patience and zero tolerance for anybody who's going to come in and do anything other than honest work. And the last superstar to be there, Bastian Schweinsteiger, while although he was on his last legs of his career, there was never any doubt whether or not he wanted to win. regardless of whether or not where he was playing, whether it was a center back or in the middle of the field, you always felt like he wanted to win and he wanted to be there. The club just couldn't simply get over the line. Shaqiri, he just didn't want to be there, and that was blatantly obvious. And he was, making $8 million a year and just basically spitting in the face of Chicago fans.
Yeah, selfishly speaking, this signing I want to see it come off because Chicago Fire come to Allianz Field in September, and that would be awesome to see Kevin De Bruyne in person, and just add to the list of celebrity players making their way to Allianz Field this season. Elsewhere across the league, Toronto, Montreal, Galaxy remain winless on the season so far. Who's gonna break that first between those three? Tyler, I'll start with you, then Manny.
Could you imagine in Vegas right now if you bet whatever 8 weeks?
Oh my goodness.
These three teams would not have a win.
And parlay that with Vancouver being in the semifinals of CONCACAF Champions Cup. Can I say pass? I don't know who I don't know who's gonna get there first. I had a feeling, as much as I'll admit that I'm wrong about the Vancouver Whitecaps and where they're going to finish, I had the Galaxy missing the playoffs this year. It's been really bad, and you can just see that this is a group that doesn't believe that they can win a game right now. And Manny, that's like a dangerous place to be as a collective.
And then it adds on to like you're going to start, which are reality, which is there's massive injury issues. But as the season builds, every new year is a new year. We have to build the group, you have to build confidence, and the reality is, if you start to create excuses, it's going to seep into the entirety of the year. And for the Galaxy, it was a tough tie. They tied at home against Houston this weekend? I mean, a game that felt like they should finally get points and start getting off the ground going, and they couldn't do it. And obviously there was the quality of play or the drama of the game where you create your own good luck and bad luck. And they really are creating a lot of bad luck. Probably for me, who are the next three, Jonathan? We're going to play this game of who gets the first win. I need to who do they play this weekend?
Let's see here. LA Galaxy. I'm looking for them on the schedule. You're kind of throwing this on me. LA Galaxy play Austin. Montreal play Orlando. They host Orlando, season or home opener for them. And who did I say? Toronto. They are at Real Salt Lake this weekend.
And you said Galaxy are at home?
They're at Austin. Sorry.
Ooh. That's a tough.
An Austin team that's just coming off a 5-1 beat down by Vancouver at home.
Yeah, that's going to be an angry Austin group. I'm going to go ahead and say Montreal in their home opener after 7 straight games to start the season on the road.
Yeah, I'll take the same bet. Just like Orlando, maybe it's still cold in Montreal. Orlando, had a little bit of an off weekend, although they looked good. They just had some bad drama in their world. So, yeah, I'll go with the same. Let's go with Montreal if it happens this weekend.
We'll keep asking you this, Manny, until all three of those teams find a win this season. We'll see how long this little bit goes on for. Hey students, need a study break? If you got a .edu email address, we've got deals for you. Sign up for our Student Deals program to be notified of ticket offerings as low as $20 for various Minnesota United home games. Visit MNUFC.com to learn more. Let's jump into the Toronto match, unless you guys have any other notes from the weekend. It was a busy weekend across Major League Soccer, but we've also got to get to this Toronto-Minnesota United draw at the weekend. I kind of agree with the description that you had earlier, Tyler. You just kind of feel like you need a shower after this one. It wasn't that great of a match for me personally on the radio broadcast side. It felt like the Loons kind of struggled in this one despite having a lot more possession, and I know we can get into that as well. That is a big topic of conversation around this club week in and week out, it seems like, and having nearly 50% is abnormality for this club this season, but it just felt like they struggled with the ball on the weekend, Manny.
I'll start out with, because we're now going into our Minnesota territory and the recap. I'm going to flip it and kind of give the Vancouver vibe that we're about to go into details about why we are still remaining unbeaten, but we didn't get 3 points on the road against a team that just had 2 draws against Miami and Vancouver, 0-0 respectively. And for me, this game, on defensive side, we were top notch once again. I still think we had the better expected goals. I didn't look up the data, but I'm almost positive we did. And so now we're in a good way, a little bit like, well, what could have been done to get 3 points? I actually look at us as in the similar vein of Vancouver and saying, wow, if this is where we are, where we're going to start to really talk about the little things about not getting 3 points against a team that's 8 games in at home, desperate for a win, and it was just kind of a blog game where we couldn't get going offensively, which is all very true. Now we'll go into the details. I go, that was a nice road points for us. And then I look at the New York game and I'm like, we just got 4 points on the road and kind of two weird places to play for different reasons. New York's just always a crapshoot. And Toronto, they were desperate. And I think they used that desperation to really hurt us in the midfield a little bit. I thought we were going to maybe get a little more possession. They structured defensively sometimes. Our Italian duel doesn't always love the work rate, and we didn't quite move the ball. So you're right. I didn't think we got going offensively. I didn't think we quite felt like we could have hurt them like I think on paper we maybe should have. But I flip it off again right away and I say, wow, we are really now looking at smaller details about a team that went to Toronto, team that was desperate. We handled them offensively very well, and then we just couldn't get going offensively. So I was pretty happy with the result when I look at it from that lens.
Tyler, overall thoughts on the 0-0 draw?
Uh, Retweet everything Manny said, and like I think honestly that's a really, really easy game to lose in MLS.
Yes.
On the road in Canada against a group that's been struggling mightily, and with them clearly trying to make sure that Minnesota had the ball and trying to create room for Bernadeschi and Insigne, like that's like as easy of a game to lose, and that's the game that like this league was designed for you to lose. Go to an inferior team, and
no wins yet, by the way, Tyler, in the year. I mean, they're desperate. No wins, 8 games in.
Yeah. And a first year head coach who's trying to figure it out, and like clearly this was a game set up like in the world of trap games. This is it. So for them to be able to get the point, and like and Manny, you mentioned it, like 4 points on the road in two road games, coming back home for two home games. And Eric said it after the game. He was like, when I look back on it in terms of like the collective in these two trips, and that's the best way to look at an MLS season because it's so long, it's so daunting, small little pockets of games, right? And just try to like put together these little mini runs. 4 points on the road is great to then come home against the Dallas team that has been struggling at home, but great on the road. I think it's something to just sort of like dust your hands of and take your shower and then come home to Allianz and then hopefully the Wonderwall is doing their thing.
Yeah, it's a long season. You're going to have these types of performances where you're not exactly thrilled with the result despite getting the point. But as I said, it was another point, as you guys have pointed out, 4 points on the road. That's 2 points a game. That's kind of the benchmark of where you want to be week in and week out. And the Loons remain 7 unbeaten now, return home against FC Dallas. Let's jump into the kind of minute details of this match. Joaquin Pareo, once again, kind of the workhorse for this team, was really excellent. He was one of the bright spots for the team. What did you think of his performance once again, Manny? He continues to just shine for Minnesota this season.
So we got rid of the compliments. There's way more compliments than negatives. I'm going to push back. No, I'm not going to rate anybody in the center midfield as having a good game when, to me, the most important thing for us to win the midfield with better possession, just getting the ball moving side to side and getting Bernadeschi and Insigne to see if they were really hungry to defend that day. Again, great stuff by Dane. Romero, oh my gosh, outstanding. Boxall, outstanding. Diaz, outstanding. Our wingbacks, again, I'm giving all the confidence defensively. I just think the wingbacks and our center midfielders, they just need to be a little bit hungrier to fight to keep possession, and not even in the offensive third to create chances, just to keep it a little bit more, and not in the same way when we're defending, counterattacking, but just to like unsettle Toronto. And by the way, I thought the first 10 minutes we were great. That second 15, you saw Toronto looked like they wanted more. And I'm not criticizing our guys. Ultimately, we just talked about how long of a season is. It's almost impossible to play 90 minutes at a tempo and rate and these little details. So to me, my answer of the only thing I'd be criticized was just the hunger of the midfield to help the rest of the team be the engine to decide when to go forward or when to keep it, or if we lose it, we're going to win it back right away. So that was my only kind of small negative, was that we didn't get going offensively, partly because I thought the midfield wasn't quite hungry enough to keep the ball.
With I know I mentioned the amount of possession that the team had, nearly 50%. That's always been a conversation around this team, Tyler, this season is how they performed and how little possession they've had. They nearly had 50% on Saturday. What did you think of what they did on the ball? And we'll get to the defensive side. No, Manny wants to get to that, and rightfully so. Another clean sheet for Dane, his fourth of the season. But possession wise, I think that's the topic conversation around this team every week. And having the most they've had all season, what did you think of how that changed the way they played on Saturday?
Before Tyler answers, John, I just want to make sure. I know we had more possession, but if you look at the details of the game, at the
Yeah.
times when we needed to keep possession, we were sloppy. We could have taken over the game and created waves of attacks. And we just, again, if you talk to Eric, I'm sure you'd say the same thing where it's not about that we had more possession this game. We just didn't have at the right times where we wanted to show and put our impact on the game. Or frankly, just say, here, we'll give the ball back to a spot where we can defend well. So again, like I said, I'm going to defer to Tyler now, but I want to make sure I get that clear. Like, this is really small stuff that I'm enjoying that we're talking about, as opposed to big concepts, whether it's, not creating chances. Even within all this, we created some good chances. And then on the defensive side, usually if you do give up sloppy giveaways, you get burned and you lose that game 2-3-1. Tyler, go. Sorry, I didn't mean
No. I'm glad you said it so that I didn't have to, because I didn't feel like it was a game, like watching it back. I was just like, oh, like, and I know that this has been a topic of conversation, and even going back to last year, it was like, well, how is this group going to figure out how to break down a low block? But like, for me, there's a couple different things. Number one is that games that I've either called at BMO or watched back, I always find the road team struggles to move the ball quickly. I don't know what it is about that place. I don't know why that is, but there are some stadiums and some venues and some travel destinations for the road team where like they just aren't able to just ping it and play with a sense of urgency. And that's sort of where I felt like in those moments where Manny's saying we weren't able to have the ball in moments like that, you were going to create stuff. That's what I saw initially. So that's one. Two is that like Premier League and La Liga and Champions League sides struggle to break down really low blocks when a group is organized. For an MLS team to do that, it's even more difficult. Like, this league is a transition league. When teams are outside of Columbus, how many teams are we looking at and saying they are able to break down two really low compact blocks of four on a consistent basis? Like, Columbus is one of the few teams that's capable of doing that. So for I agree, like, for the club to be at this point where we could talk about them and be like, well, why isn't it looking better when they do have the ball and trying to break these teams down? Again, Toronto are desperate, and Toronto and a desperate team is going to defend for their lives. So like, I give credit to them for sort of like, getting back behind the ball, getting into good defensive shapes, and especially when Minnesota were trying to figure out ways to go quickly, they either were sloppy or Toronto got organized quickly. So like, as much as it can be, well, Minnesota didn't have their best stuff on the day, you have to give credit to Toronto because they certainly had their best stuff in those transitional defensive moments. But yeah, I don't, and I was going to push back on you, John, if Manny didn't, on the fact that like Pereira sure is like becoming a focal point, but I wasn't particularly impressed with that performance. But like, again, I thought that this was like kind of a coming out party for Romero. I thought he was
oh my
so good.
gosh,
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I know we're trying.
Oh, I love it. I think you're right. I mean, that he was my man of the match, so for sure.
So
Jonathan, what were you going to say?
yeah, I was going to go off of the Romero point and kind of focus on the defensive side because, again, another clean sheet for the Loons. That's what we like to see defensively. This team keeps hassling and making things difficult for the opponents. Nicholas Romero having an outstanding day, as you guys have pointed out. How does that affect what we saw from Morris Duggan earlier this year? Two left-footed center backs. We know the Loons play with three center backs usually. Duggan's kind of been moved to the bench because of some, I guess, transition and kind of rotating. That's the word I was looking for. Rotating of those guys. But Romero's taking advantage of those minutes wholeheartedly and really having his best day on Sunday against Toronto. What does that mean for Morris Duggan, who was really impressive early on in this season, Manny?
Oh, I think he's in a great spot. I mean, I think right now we have, 4-5 center backs that are outstanding, and it allows Eric to really decide whether he wants to kind of create a situation where he rotates or decide where he wants to create a situation where he's going to kind of tactically do it, or the reality is we're going to have injuries eventually here at some point. So it's great for Duggan. I think he had it's nice that he doesn't have to be thrown out there every week. Now you have Romero coming in. I just love right now the connection where you just talked about Rapera. You like to your eye the last couple games. I think Romero and Rosales, all three of them being left-footed, all three of them kind of figuring out how to connect, is super exciting. I just
that trio on the left-hand side has been
oh
outstanding.
yeah, and it'll grow into the right-hand side, and I think it'll grow into Eric being like. I love the possession talk. I love the high-level tactical talk because we are playing up straight up a 5-3-2, and I don't think there was a team in the league that started the season playing exactly like us, being so organized and structured with it, especially giving the opposing teams their wide outside back so much time and space in certain spots in the field. But if they come to others, we hurt them. I do see us now thinking about sometimes letting Bongi and Joseph go up there and almost having it be like a 3-3-4 almost, where they're going to be up there with Tani, and now we can see if we can do some possession up higher and really hurt teams. So to me, that's going to be Romero's qualities. He's going to start to really help us decide when we want to be a 5-3-2 and when we want to be a 3-5-T, or even again, like I said, almost like a 3-3-4 if we're really hungry now to high press. So to me, he's been outstanding for 3 straight games.
Defensively, Tyler, what were the keys for the Loons on Saturday to limiting the chances for Bernardeschi, for Insigne, for the rest of the Toronto attack?
I just felt like even when Bernardeschi decided to like switch sides at that juncture in the game that he did, I felt like there was that one brief moment where he slipped the ball in for, I think it was Derek Etienne, and that was one of the more clearer chances of the game. But like I thought that the cover, the balance, and like Romero, I think the reason why Manny and I are saying that he had such a good game is because everything that he was doing in those sort of emergency moments, you can't really teach that. He sort of was noticing where the danger could potentially come and was making sure that he was in the right position to be able to defend it when it did get to that point. But I just thought that like as a collective and like with Boxy sort of like running the show and being in the middle, and we know that, he's not exactly the athlete that he once was, but like that's why you have the cover. Like I was watching Cincinnati's game back, and Nick Hagland started like his 4th or 5th game coming back from like a second like season-ending injury and what should have been the end of his career. And Miles Robinson's been occupying the middle of that 3. Miles Robinson is not the middle of a 3 central defense. Michael Boxall is, and it allows Romero and whoever else is going to be back there to be able to sort of just say like, all right, like we can cover you and get in these foot races and be able to sort of act as cover for you if you're going to go ahead and step and get physical and make life difficult for whoever's going to be playing in the number 9 position or whoever's going to be occupying. And I think that you're starting to see the complements of everybody's defensive capabilities come out across the board. And I think that that's why Romero flourished, is because he knew where to cover Boxy and sort of like what Insigne and Bernardeschi were going to be all about. I don't think that they had their best stuff on the night, and I think Insigne is still trying to find his form after a pretty strange start to the campaign for him. But yeah, I mean, as good of a defensive performance as you could ask for on the road, and that's why they didn't lose the game.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. And I think just giving a shout out to Robin, I feel like he is trying to work with the really tough circumstances. And, they've got 3 straight shutouts. So they'll have a big one, see if they can kind of get a win off of those 3 shutouts. But given the drama of Toronto the last couple of years, to get them to play the way they did against us, it was, to me, really impressive. Because I thought if we played really well defensively, they would kind of lose their shape and lose their kind of go back to their habits of the last year and a half. And they didn't do that in this game. And clearly they didn't do that against Miami or Vancouver as well. So to me, it seems like it's a shift for Toronto a little bit. It's a really small one. And I'm sure their fan base and even Robin would like the 3 points at home against us. But there is something there he's trying to get, and he's done a good job of getting those guys at least on board for a little bit more kind of individual responsibility within the discipline of the game. We'll see where that goes. I mean, again, that's a different world, different problems in our world. But from an outsider, they've got a big mountain to climb, I think, if I was a Toronto fan.
I don't want to feel like I'm being completely negative on this match, and this question is certainly going to feel that way. But when you look at this match combined with the Galaxy and the Sporting Kansas City matches, Those are 3 points in games against teams that have had yet to win at that time. Is that a concern for you that Minnesota, as high as they are in the Western Conference standings, have shown moments that they struggle to get results against teams that they certainly should when you look at it on paper, Manny?
I'm not going to go there only because I think
I know it's early.
I'll give you Kansas City 1,000%, like no doubt.
Yeah.
Like we were up 3-0, we were dominating. I think Eric even put his hand up and said, "We changed the system, we changed players." That stuff, and then but the next week we went out and we had 5 guys missing. We had to, in a sense, probably at that point thought we weren't even the favorites given kind of how many starters missing. Should have won the game. Last minute they had a set piece. 2-2, respond the next week with a great 2-0 win. And again, I would look at this game the way Tyler said it. I feel like 8 times out of 10, Toronto probably would have beaten most MLS teams on the day, and they didn't. So I'm going glass half full, except for Kansas City. I get it. But we've responded really well. And now we have 2 great home games to kind of put the opportunity in. So I'm there. I would say if we're going to the details, like I thought our subs could have been a little bit more impactful if we're going to try to go for the 3 points. Obviously, DJ is a little bit more defensively oriented. So when he took Bongi out, he was worried about the yellow. I think Eric did at that point say it was like 58th minute. He maybe kind of
pretty early in the second half.
Yeah, I would like the 1 point versus 3. That's his call. That maybe leaving Bongi maybe 7 or 8 minutes. Sammy going to the midfield versus up top. The subs weren't for us to go out and try to get that 3 points. We weren't desperate. So I'm okay with Eric saying, no, I really like 1 or 3 on the day. But it does mean that these next 2 games are a big deal, at home. We really need to have that home form like we had a couple years ago. Last year, that's one of our struggles was to get points at home.
Tyler, am I wrong? Am I wrong to have? I don't want to say I have concerns about it. It's fair to say that when you look at the schedule, you look at the results of the season, that there could be concerns when you look at the way those games, the results of those games compared.
And you're okay to disagree with me, Tyler. You're a guest. We were okay to say, "Boo, those are red flags." No problem.
We want to be fair.
You can talk to my fiance. I have no problem disagreeing with anybody. All right, it's not an issue of mine. But Jonathan's my kind of sports fan, man. Are you like a closet Jets fan, like the ultimate pessimist over there? Like,
Minnesota sports at all? Do you know?
I do.
I'm a Minnesota sports fan. We're
God.
constantly pessimistic about everything.
Kindra was trying to liken being a Vikings fan to being a Jets fan. I was like, at least you've made the playoffs in the last 2 decades. Like, don't try to go there with me. And you got the best out of my boy Sam Darnold, but. To your, like, Jonathan, like, you guys are in second place right now, man. Like, I know you're not being negative and just playing the bit, but like, there are actual teams with real problems in this league. Minnesota's not one of them. Like I remember talking, who was it? Spencer Ritchie, who used to be a backup for the Chicago Fire, backup for a lot of teams in the league, and he became a good friend of mine. And I was texting with him after, I think it was Chicago's draw against DC this year, where Jacob Morel had the bicycle kick or something like that, and like. We always talk about how it's like, well, if we did this, we would have gotten the 3 points and we'd be somewhere different in the table. And it's like my least favorite saying of all time from any coach in a press conference after the fact. And Eric's like never somebody to say that or do anything like that. But like, that's what you're pointing to in the table right now. And you're like, well, if we had finished it off against Kansas City and maybe played a little bit better for 10 minutes against the Galaxy, then we'd be in first place right now. Cool, great. You guys are in second place right now, and the only reason you're not in first is because Vancouver have been the best team in MLS, which nobody could have predicted. So I completely agree with Manny. I'm not going there. I'm not hitting the panic button. Sure, the Kansas City game sucks, and like as much as everybody was focusing on Kansas City because they were sort of clearly about to be in this transitional phase as far as Peter Vermees and the whole thing, I was thinking about it from your guys' standpoint because I cover you guys a lot. I was like, boy, that's a tough pill to swallow if you're a Loon fan. But that for me, like that 45 minutes is really the only 45 minutes to hang your head about. You even played well in the 1 loss in the season against LAFC, and you still probably should have gotten more out of that game than you did. So
I still think we're going to have Kansas City, not because of giving up a 3-goal lead, but because of the reality is we probably had 45 minutes of our best away soccer, maybe in the history of the club, up there in the top 10, to really kind of not figuring out a way to close out that game. So I think that's why it hits more. But I get your point, Jonathan. I can see the teams we've had. I think you're bringing up a good point, though, is like, have we had a pretty good schedule to start the season? Yes. Did we know that before? No, because you didn't know where teams are going to be. So you're right. And I think I'm going to help you with the segue. in that's why I think these next two home games are so important because we got a Dallas team that, ironically, has been good on the road, but struggle at home, and they're just started out okay. And then we got a Vancouver team that probably won't be playing, a full lineup against us just because of the CONCACAF Champions League. So I'm I just look at the opportunity to start the season strong, and it might be, you could argue that yes, the schedule's been a little bit softer than it was last year for us to start.
Manny, doing this a year and a half with me, knows my transition points.
I do. Sorry.
I'm starting to read me now. As you said, the next couple games for Minnesota, critically important against tough teams, against teams that are in at least the playoff standings in the Western Conference. Dallas, Vancouver, Austin, then you got Miami, Houston coming up after that, rounding that out. But these next two games for Minnesota, starting off with this Dallas game coming up this weekend at Allianz Field. This is going to be really important because Dallas on the season, as you said, Manny, 2-0-2 on the road. Though I don't think I've seen an update since after the game when Eric Quill said it was an ankle sprain, but I don't remember. I don't think I've seen an update on Peter Musa, who's been one of their key attackers this season. 3 goals, 3 primary assists for Dallas this season. He's been excellent for them, but left with an ankle sprain, had to be carted off the field. It looked pretty serious at the time, but it didn't seem like their head coach was too concerned about it afterwards. So that'll be a question of whether he plays on Saturday. I don't think I've seen anything yet, unless you guys have, but that'll certainly change how Dallas plays on Saturday. Tyler.
For sure. And he said after the game that they didn't think it was going to be as severe as they initially thought. Like, I know that like what you're talking about, like the scenes of it looked like it was like a long-term injury, but
yeah.
he said that it wasn't going to be. I would be surprised if he plays. I mean, an ankle sprain, like I'm coming off of one myself. Now, I'm not a world-class athlete. I like to think that I am. But it took a while, and Manny was making fun of me in the boot, basically telling me to give it up at Allianz when he saw me earlier this year.
I'm just jealous that people can still, get out there and do it. So,
no, but it will change, and like, not for nothing, but I know that this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but it's important. But Lucho Acosta for me is still like a top 3 player in this league, and he was he had clearly the best connection with Musa on the team immediately, and those two linking up and just sort of understanding where the space is, and Musa understanding that whenever he got the ball from Lucho, he just needs to give it right back, and magic will happen. And everybody at Cincinnati learned that for 4 years as well. So I think that it's going to significantly impact not only how Dallas plays overall, but Lucho's impact on the game as well, because then it's going to become a scenario where he's going to have to find a different toy to play with. And I don't think that there's anybody else on the field who really understands him the way that Musa does. So it's unfortunate because, as a fan, you want to come, when you go to Allianz and you're welcoming a team in like Dallas, you want to see their full complement of players. And Musa certainly has been great, and for a big price tag too. But I definitely think that it will change the way that they play. But make no mistake about it, they're still very capable of winning the game even without Musa.
11 points from their first 8 games of the season. Manny, what have been your thoughts of Eric Quill's tenure in FC Dallas so far, coming up from the USL Championship in the offseason? I like to see those kinds of moves as well, not just from player standpoints, but from the coach's standpoint, see that coaching pipeline start to work in that direction. What have you taken away from how Eric Quill has set up Dallas over the first 8 games?
Yeah, I'll start with, I agree with you. I love the coaching pathway Eric's taken. I actually played with Eric a little bit back in the Tampa Bay Mutiny Rowdies days, late 90s, early 2000s. And he's had a really good journey. And I think to me, it's been a pretty good start, given that I think they've had a tough schedule. I brought up the home versus away because, they've been really poor at home. I saw they're doing some construction, so my brain is weirdly like, I wonder if the construction's affecting their kind of home field advantage. And then I wonder if that means they're galvanized and hungry to get points on the road. So to me, when I look at this weekend, I think Eric's, for some reason, certainly has the guys playing a little bit more hungry away. So I think they'll be ready, and I think they'll be organized. And they do have this player that, traditionally I think we've handled him pretty well, knock on wood. But he'll be the key. Everything will go through him. He can have his days where he is impactful and is a best 3 player in the league. He can have his days a little bit where if you really work hard and are ready to kind of make it tough on him, he sometimes checks out. When we played Cincinnati a couple times, I felt like he sometimes decided to check out in the day. So I think it's going to be important for us to be hungry to deal with him and to kind of make sure that we hopefully have him check out on the day. And I think it'll be a good home result for us. But it is one of those games when you have that type of player, you have to be aware that he can make special things happen.
Yeah, he didn't register a goal or an assist when FC Cincinnati came to Allianz Field late last season. How has he kind of transformed that Dallas attack, which I know went through a lot of transformation this offseason, moving on from Paul Arriola, from Jesus Ferreira. That was a huge talking point this offseason, what Dallas would look like, and then they bring in Lucho Acosta on, I believe it was the cash transfer trade. And
Yep.
it was one of the first big ones across the league. How has he transformed that attack to kind of pick up where those guys left off last season, Tyler?
Well, first things first is that there was a huge overhaul, and not
Yeah.
only on the attacking side of the ball, but defensively as well. I mean, you say goodbye to Nkosi Tafari, who for my money is one of the more underrated defenders in MLS, and I thought he did an excellent job. And Nico Estevez's group, for a couple of years, albeit they played some of the most boring football in Major League Soccer, they were always very organized defensively, and they always had some of the best expected goal difference. And I'm not a huge statistical nerd, but I say that because Nico always said that to us in our conversations, is like that's what they're focused on, is limiting big opportunities, which essentially is what that XGD is going to bring you in terms of like breaking it down in layman's terms. Lucho has brought some much needed spark and flair to this club. I mean, even going back to um, the Luchi Gonzalez days, like that. Even then, like I didn't feel ever like this was a club that I want to turn on. Even when Jesus Ferreira was having his best season as an MLS player, like I never was like I want to flip them on. Lucho Acosta immediately makes me want to turn on an FC Dallas game to see what he's doing. So I think that along with an Anderson Julio signing, you buy out Patrickson Delgado's loan deal, which was important. You retool the defensive line a little bit. You bring in the Ozazi kid, and then you have Shackmore on one side, and then Nolan, was it Nolan? Yeah,
Yep.
Nolan Norris on the other side. So like, I think that there's some things to be excited about if you're a Dallas fan. Um, but I also think that they're still very much trying to figure out exactly what this group is all about. And it's early, right? And I think that this Jekyll and Hyde away and home form, I'm with Manny. Like the construction and the lack and like just watching the games aesthetically kind of gross to look at. I can't imagine what it's like to play there and see half of your stadium blocked off and like undergoing construction. I mean, you think back to Fulham when Craven Cottage was being renovated. They got relegated while that was all going on. And I can only imagine that it certainly affects home form. So for me, this group is undergoing they're finding themselves right now, but at the bare minimum, it's more entertaining to watch because, good Lord, like there were a few games that I did for FC Dallas last year where like Kendra and I could have taken a nap for 20 minutes and woken up and not missed a thing, and nobody would have cared that we did either because there was nothing to call.
Yeah. By the way, I love the answers and credit to Dallas and their fans, but I think there are a lot of fans on the other side. Last year, I feel this uptick in their club in terms of support. I think that whole area is now becoming a destination area, like almost like it's Dallas doesn't really have downtowns, but it is becoming a much more dense area. So I felt that will hopefully in the end lead to a stadium and experience for Dallas to even raise their level. And I know they've always struggled sometimes to get fans out to that area. So to me, it feels like there's a nice trajectory for the club, especially if they get the stadium renovated the way they want to. And then on the field, you're right. It's fun to have a player. And what's great about Allianz Field is welcoming these world-class players. And Acosta is an unknown. I mean, I put on my Minnesota United hat. I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous because I know there's an uncertainty about when you have that type of top level talent, what he can do to take over a game. I also get excited because I think if we do, they don't have a lot of other ideas. I think it's really one of those ones where the ball will go through him a lot. He really will dictate whether they're going to have a good day or not. So, and I think Tyler's right. I'm still torn about trying to figure out what their identity is. So I'm glad you didn't ask me that question because I don't know if I could have answered it.
And just to jump in really quickly, Manny, off your point in terms of like everything goes through him, like everything goes through him, but Cincinnati struggled last year when they were going through the Bupenza. And by the way, rest in peace, Daniel Bupenza, and
Yeah.
thoughts and prayers to his friends and family. A horrific news earlier today coming out that he passed away,
Oh,
playing in China right now. But when they were going through that transitional phase of having gotten rid of Brandon Vasquez, Aaron Bupenza leaves the club, Kevin Kelsey wasn't the striker that you had initially signed up for or got on loan. Cincinnati struggled. Lucho struggled. And with no number nine to play with and to sort of like force the back line to drop a little bit because you want to condense his space in between the back line and in between the midfield. But you can't do that if you have a genuine goal scoring threat of a number nine that you also have to worry about. And that's when Lucho was at his best, was when he had either Brenner or Vasquez to be able to do that. And he didn't have that last year. And that's why things sort of sputtered towards the end of the season. And with no Musa, this could be he checks out kind of game. But if he gets going and gets into a rhythm in the first 10 minutes and realize he might be able to have his way with Will Trapp in the middle of the field, then he might become really interested in sort of putting on a show and maybe with a goal and 3 assists on the day. So you really just don't know what you're going to get out of him. But I will say if Musa doesn't play, he becomes much less dangerous, and history has proven with him on the field, he needs a number nine to be able to function at his best.
so Tyler, I don't know if I can answer this, or because you got to prep it. I know you interview coaches for these games, so I'm not sure if asking this question is appropriate. Or you can answer it, but do you think Dallas will kind of play a similar system? Is Eric Quill kind of a system guy, or is he going to be flexible and say no Musa, so I might switch up the system?
I have no idea. I've never spoken to him before. We don't talk to him until tomorrow.
Perfect. So what do you think?
What do I think? What do I think is that I would imagine that you're probably going to throw Anderson Julio into the striker position and then maybe throw Leo Chu out wide.
So you think if he's going to stick with a 4-2-3-1, kind of like he's been doing? I think.
I think because that's what Lucho knows how to play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess I don't know, but it is an inappropriate question. But I appreciate the fact you have to. Yes.
Final question off this game for you guys before we close out the show. Loons come away with 3 points on Saturday. We're talking about what as the reason for that. Manny, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think we already said it. For me, it's just making sure we create the bad habits in Luciano Costa that kind of permeates throughout the team when he has a bad day, which is he's not impactful, and then they kind of lose their defensive shape. And then I would say the one thing we didn't talk about, which is interesting because it's so fun, is just that I think we've got two hungry forwards that will deliver, can deliver, are playing with crazy confidence. I'm probably overconfident in the Toronto game that they tried to find each other almost too much. But I think these two guys are really in form and are hungry to score goals, especially at home. So to me, it's just those guys walking off the game being impactful. I don't see us not getting the 3 points.
Tyler?
By the way, I want to amend my answer. Logan Farrington is obviously going to start at the number 9 position.
There it is. Okay.
Not Anderson Julio. So yes, he will stick to the same system. You just hope that Logan is. Why Minnesota is going to, because me and Kendra are on the call, obviously. No. I agree with, and I feel like that's a kind of like a quote unquote like negative answer to say that it's because Lucho sort of has one of his days where he checks out. But honestly, like if you're just thinking about the opposition, it makes sense, right? I also I want to see a little more like Manny had talked about earlier when we were discussing the Toronto game. I want to see more of the wingbacks getting forward, and it would be really cool if that was a reason why, especially if you think that Dallas is going to be sitting in and hoping for those counter moments and hoping that they're going to be able to get Lucho in transition and get Logan in transition and Anderson Julio in transition. So I guess this is like not really answering the question, but I hope it's because they're able to throw some things together when they do have more of the ball and break down a couple of low blocks. But I think the obvious answer is because Kelvin and or Tanny are going to take their chances as they should.
No,
So,
I just love that because I still think the evolution of the way we're playing is the wingbacks to be comfortable defensively but hungry to go forward. And I much would rather have it how it's kind of played out where we are now a little bit more sound defensively. So now Bongi and Joseph are like, yeah, I can get up and down. That doesn't mean they'll shirk their duty and not be back, but I think if what you said is true, I think you're right. I think that's a great idea of how we can really turn that kind of defensive posture into an aggressive home field posture for the fans and for our team. Because again, I don't think we can play, that defensive posture for 34 games and be one of the top teams in the league. So to me, I like your answer because it's exciting because it means that there's an evolution here where we can not only become one of the top teams in the league, but sustain it now as well.
And not for nothing, but Joseph has the motor to be able to do it. I mean, to me, he's one of the most unsung players in this league. Like, I absolutely adore him. And he just never stops. Even in the 91st, 92nd minute, there were a couple times last year where I'm looking over at Kindra. I was like, how is he still operating at this speed right now? Like, that's not normal. So even if he gets caught, he has the pace and he has the fitness to be able to make up for it and to get back.
We see Bongi get on the score sheet for the first time this season, creep within 3 goals of Robin Lod for the all-time team lead.
I like it, Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, to me, I'm not saying it would be a bounce back game, and I didn't have a bad game, but he wasn't very impactful in Toronto, and hopefully he'll have some on the field to get some hunger again. I think the wingbacks. I just love. My brain is going to Tyler's point there because I do think they are secretly, have way more in them, but are still just getting comfortable with this wingback position, which is really demanding. You're asking these guys to be outside backs plus, contribute for goals. So I think it's going in a good direction. Good prediction there, Jonathan. I like it.
Wow, the glass half full guy. He's turned the page of the episode. Good for him.
You guys have kicked the pessimism out of me. It's all right. We're there at this point of the episode, guys. It's been fun talking.
Are we going to go to the Timberwolves over the Lakers? I'm calling it here for sure.
And ESPN predict all their 10 NBA experts predicting the Lakers winning that one. Gotta love when all the experts pick one team. It's always great. Looking forward to this game this weekend, guys. Looking forward to seeing you at Allianz Field. Another setting up for what is hopefully another gorgeous day at Allianz Field. Loons hosting FC Dallas this weekend. Looking forward to this one. 7:30 p.m. kickoff with Tyler Terens and Kindred Aubin over on MLS Season Pass. 7 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terror and myself over on the radio broadcast on 1500 ESPN. Looking forward to talking to you guys then. And then Loons fans will be back next week to review this game and talk about the upcoming Vancouver game. Looking forward to it. We'll talk to you then.